Hello and welcome to Cryptid by State Halfway Point Recap. You all have asked me for a long video, so here it is. Today we have a reason to celebrate since we finally hit the halfway point of this series 2 weeks ago. This accomplishment is a little bittersweet to me since it is both an exciting event as well as an indicator that the series is almost over. Looking back, I knew I was hesitant to start the Cryptid by State videos, since I thought it would essentially remove all opportunities for me to talk about cryptids in the States once we were finally done. However, it has become one of the most popular uploads that I have made, and I have really come to love and enjoy it. When I started this back on September 9th of 2019, I recall just choosing what state I would like to talk about. And this all changed when I started the voting process where you were able to participate and let me know where we're heading next. As with any new project, participation was relatively low, and it shocks me to look at my old graphs and seeing that the first state you voted on was Pennsylvania, and it had a total of 15 votes. Jumping ahead to today, your votes have become an overwhelming part of the comment section, and we are seeing states receiving votes numbering in the high 30s or 40s. Not only did these videos really interest a lot of you, but I have to note that they also garnered the attention from places outside of YouTube. The site National Cryptid Society featured a few of them on their social media, and each upload has been a regular feature on the blogs of the site Sasquatch Chronicles. Before jumping to a recap, I must say that making these past 25 videos, I have noticed something that is quite hard to ignore. Most people say, almost in jest, that just about every state has some type of Bigfoot sighting. The interesting thing is that, even though I normally add those encounters into my honorable mentions section, I have yet to find a single state that doesn't have a report of Bigfoot roaming about. This is fascinating, since most will use the phrase, just about every state, but from what we have all found out, it would be more accurate to say, every state does. Even though we still have 25 states to investigate, I am fairly confident that this won't change. Another oddity worth mentioning is that dogman sightings are almost as frequent as Bigfoot. Without going through all my prior notes, I honestly can't think of too many states, if any, that doesn't have some sort of dogman sighting. As stated previously, our cryptid family road trip began on September 9th, 2019, and the first state that we visited was Illinois. In this location, we saw reports that still continue to this day that Mothman has been sighted in quite a few areas. One of the state's most prominent and fascinating cryptids is the one known as the three-legged Enfield horror. To this day, there isn't a good explanation behind what it was, and from what I am aware, it really hasn't been spotted for quite some time. The ever-popular Thunderbird has been sighted all over the state. Even though I don't plan on mentioning Bigfoot for each location, this one does seem to have a rather peculiar one. It goes by various names, such as Farmer City Monster, Salt Creek Monster, Murfreesboro Mud Monster, and the Coal Hollow Road Monster. The reason behind all these names is due to it showing up in different locations. It is a gray-haired Sasquatch with yellow eyes, and there are over 200 reported sightings of it. After making the video, I was inundated with many people commenting that alien big cats were frequently reported by residents. Another cryptid is one that really doesn't have an official name, but I'll call it the Peoria Creature, due to where it was spotted. This one troubles me, since it is very similar to a sighting I once had. Not long ago, a viewer emailed me saying that they also saw a similar creature. I would love to share that story, but I am uncertain if they want me to share it publicly. In the comment section of that video, a viewer named Vincent Malloy informed me of a different type of encounter in Peoria. He said that in the spring of 1999 at 4 a.m., he was driving his truck along the area and he saw a massive 10-foot tall creature step out from the tree line and cross the road. It was black in color and it was so large that its shoulders alone were as wide as 3/4 of the driving lane Vincent was traveling on. I'm not sure if this was a Sasquatch or not, but if it was, that was an incredibly large version of it. Our next state that we visited on October 7th was New Jersey. Obviously this state has one of the most famous cryptids there are, and that would be the Jersey Devil. Sharing this spotlight would be the ever popular Manus Man in Hackettstown. I actually made a separate video devoted to this one quite a while ago. The creature known as the Gator Man has had quite a few sightings that go back to colonial times up to fairly recently. This state also has a report of a Maine lion roaming about. The story I loved the most from the video was the one about a ghost cow. People saw it for years but couldn't find evidence of it existing. Soon it became simply an urban legend, but then it was found to be a real cow that had managed to survive in the wild even after all the farms in the area had shut down. The notable Bigfoot in New Jersey goes by the name of Big Red Eye, obviously due to its eye color. Following this, our next state on the itinerary was my home of Pennsylvania, which we visited on November 4th. As usual, like most states, we have a lot of Bigfoot sightings, including the famed albino one in Monroe and Beaver County. What really shocked me was the amount of Dogman sightings, and was even informed that there is an area actually known as the Lichen Loop, due to the amount of sightings there. Another common cryptid would be thunderbirds, and a variation that is said to resemble a pterodactyl. The Monongahela River is said to be home to a giant man-eating turtle that sometimes is described as having two heads, and it is called the Agua. While in the water, Raystown Lake is home to a Nessie-like being, lovingly known simply as Ray. There is actually a very interesting photo of this creature, and at one point the sightings even led to the show Fact or Faked investigating it. Most people point to the creature known as Squonks as my state's famous cryptid. However, I feel very strongly that it is purely one of those stories started as a joke or simply a lumberjack tale. One creature I didn't include on my original list was mentioned to me by a viewer named Andy Glue here. This would be the sighting of a Mothman-like being in the Blairsville area. One story claims it actually blocked miners from entering a mine, and later the tunnel would explode. Andy also told me that a sighting of the creature was recorded in 1966, where it landed on a person's convertible while they were driving. This encounter was said to take place before the famous events at Point Pleasant. From Pennsylvania we traveled to Florida on December 2nd. Of course, Bigfoot is seen here, but normally and famously it is known as a skunk ape. Other common cryptid sightings are dogmen, thunderbirds, and even some reports of a megalodon. Considering that the state is surrounded by water, it wouldn't be that big of a shock that it has many water-based creatures. However, it was alarming how many were simply found in the lakes. This would include the Lake Worth muck monster, the man-eating Lake Clinch monster, and Pinky from St. John's River. All of those follow the familiar sea serpent description, but Florida does have two very unique water-based creatures. Much like New Jersey, the Gator Man is found here, but there are way more sightings of it. The second one would be probably one of my favorite unique cryptids, and it is called the Par Marfait. What this being boils down to is a yellow-eyed moss-covered version of Swamp Thing, although this one is said to be very aggressive towards humans. This is why I love this recap video, because I had totally forgotten about this creature up until now. The next stop on our road trip was on January 6th of 2020, and we visited the state of California. When most think about this state, cryptid-wise, they normally bring up the beings known as Watchers. Much like when I first made this video as well as today, I still feel like these shadow beings should be considered more of a spirit. Outside of this is probably the state's most famous creature, which would be the Fresno Nightcrawlers. In saying this, I must admit that I did get a little bit of flack in the comment section for not at least mentioning that the Patterson-Gimlin footage was shot here. But, as others mentioned, I feel this is fairly common knowledge. California has some real oddities when it comes to cryptids, such as the bloodthirsty flying monkeys known as rebobs, a similar being with a glowing red mouth and eyes known as the Gilroy gargoyles, and a weird snake-headed dog. This state has some weird goatman sightings that have been reported in 3 different areas, and it would include the Billowhack monster. A viewer named Devad Wilburn stated that these beings are simply known as goatmen, and he actually had a few friends that had seen the creature. Another viewer named Georgie Porgy 12 stated it was known as Chivo Man, and that they had encountered it a few times. I was told it was seen more frequently in the area known as Wheeler Canyon. According to Georgie, the beast chased them and even killed 2 of their dogs. Our travels then saw us visiting Michigan on February 3rd. This was the first state that seemed to really want to keep its cryptids hidden outside of the famed Dogman. It appeared that a cryptid mostly found in Canadian lore is said to make its home in this state, and that would be the white direwolf-like being known as the Wahila. In Thunder Bay, there have been unique merman sightings dating back to 1782 up until 1967. In keeping with this, Michigan has some real oddities when it comes to water creatures. The Leelanau lake monster is said to look like a stump, but can be deadly. The deadly creature that can only be described as a water cat is called Mishibisu, and it lives in Lake Huron. Many areas around the world claim to have lake monsters, with a high percentage of those being considered non-threatening. However, in Lake Superior, the one known as Pressy is said to be responsible for many deaths. The claims originate in Native American lore and carry on to this day. Another strange one would be the Dewey Lake Monster. This creature seems to be a mix between a Bigfoot, Gatorman, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. I still need to make a cryptid spotlight on this one. In this video, I went into great depth about the demon-like Nain Rouge, but currently I think it doesn't fit in with this topic. I understand why I included it since there were reported attacks, but I still feel like it's in the spirit realm. Let's not forget that this state is said to have a cow-sized green squirrel living in Montcalm County. On March 2nd, our next stop was Arizona. This state continues to be an enigma to me. For some unknown reason, I still see votes for it, even though it obviously has been done already, but even stranger is the fact that I keep forgetting that we visited this location. It should go without saying that skinwalkers are very prominent here. A cryptid that I mentioned in that video's honorable mentions section, and I feel needs a full description, is the skin fin. It is said to live in Lake Powell. It has a dorsal fin of a shark, large body, flat manatee-like tail, long neck, its head is like a plesiosaur, and its black skin is smooth. Most consider it shy, but there are tales of it becoming aggressive. Many in the comments section were quick to point out that the cryptid found in the St. John's area known as the Bobo sounded similar to the typical ghoul. This was due to it hanging out in graveyards and eating the bones of the dead. Arizona has a similar Mothman-like being known as the Yo-Yo, but from what I could gather, it doesn't have glowing red eyes. Sort of similar to this is the Apache Death Cave Aswang, although this one is gray in color, sort of bat-like, and is very dangerous to humans. In all honesty, it really resembles what many consider a gargoyle. It shouldn't be a shock that the state has a lot of reptilian sightings, and they come from all over. A viewer named Way Rad left a comment saying that in Tucson, a reptilian being climbed into a bedroom window and started to attack the person in bed. Luckily, a family member was there to chase the creature away. Keeping with this, there are pterodactyl-like animals reported frequently along with thunderbirds. Along with various Bigfoot sightings, there are also a few goatmen as well. I feel odd saying this, but apparently both versions of Chupacabra have been seen here. You all know I don't consider the dog version actually a Chupacabra, but the one reported is known as Blue Dog. Texas was our next stop on April 6th. As you may have figured, the Chupacabra is quite prevalent here. I know I draw this comparison a lot, but Texas has a cryptid known as Big Bird that, unlike what the name sounds like, it more resembles a giant black bird with red eyes and a gorilla-like face. I'm sure that you probably know that I can't help but see the similarities to Mothman here. In saying that, there are a few interesting sightings of what are called gargoyles around the state, including a riveting tale involving one being seen outside NASA in Houston. There have been goatman sightings of various types, and a form of a Thescelosaurus, but smaller, known as mountain boomers. The crocodile is a fascinating creature that is said to be a mix between a hyena, dog, and wolf. Although this being is very dangerous, since there are rumors of it possessing telepathic abilities, and it can even mimic a human's voice. A really strange sighting is that of a half-man, half-cat from the city of Mission. As strange as this may sound, I actually saw a comment in that video from a former officer that went by the name Lacrimose1985, who stated he also saw this cat creature before. Okay, so now we're heading to Ohio, which was visited on May 4th. The first cryptid that should come to mind is the Loveland Frog, but there were a few other similar beings like it. The Crosswick Monster was said to be a giant lizard that attacked a couple people. The creature was seen by quite a few, and even a hunting party battled it. The Charles Mills monster was some type of humanoid aquatic lizard being that terrorized 3 boys while they were playing on the banks of the reservoir. The Carmel area creature has been seen a few times, and it was a gray being that resembles the Fresno nightcrawlers quite a bit. There have been a few Mothman sightings around Cheshire, but the main difference is this version is gray in color rather than the typical black. The most fantastic cryptid was the werewolf seen in the town of Defiance. 2 men working in a rail yard saw this creature on 2 separate occasions, and it was dressed in tattered clothes. Other sightings emerged from the town, with one resident claiming to have been attacked by the beast, and it was utilizing a primitive club. Indiana was next, and we visited it on May 11th. A really prominent cryptid, and one that honestly was never truly seen, was the green-clawed beast. A woman was grabbed by its hand while she was swimming, and it left a print on her leg that lasted for weeks. Although I did make an interesting discovery where I linked this being to the Mills race monster. It was green, it had long claws, had fur, and more importantly, was covered in green slime. A cryptid that sounds familiar to one we have talked about in another state is the beast of Busco, which it was a giant turtle. The famed 2 to 4 foot tall creature of the Fae, known as the Pukwudgie, calls this state home. A creature known as a mud mermaid was said to reside in the waters of the town of Vevey. Although these beings didn't look like a typical mermaid, rather they were more similar to a human-sized reptile. Lake Manitou has had reports of a beast known as the Mashekanabek living in the water since 1827. While this very large cow-headed lake serpent is frequently seen as docile, there are reports that it may actually be responsible for some missing people. On June 1st, we continued our cryptid family road trip by heading to Kentucky. The most famous one here would be the Pope Lake Monster, which should honestly be simply called the Goat Man rather than Monster. However, I know you're more interested in the less popular beasts. It may seem crazy, but Kentucky has had a lot of gargoyle sightings. One being known as the Demon Leaper in Louisville, but a similar creature was also seen in Elizabethtown and Ashland. This state also has multiple reports of lizard man-like beings. Most shockingly, the area known as the Land Between the Lakes has had extremely vicious encounters with a dog man that has taken up residence there. Many people have been attacked by this being, and there is even a story from 1980 where a family were camping in the area and they were found torn to shreds by this beast. There are reports of a cryptid that is a mix between a bear and a gorilla known as a barilla. Our investigation into this state also inspired the Cryptid Spotlight video behind the portal jumping Bigfoot who terrorized residents from Spottsville. We traveled to New York on July 6th. In this video we learned the fascinating story of a sheep squatch-like being that was seen on a few occasions in Copenhagen around 1900. This video also presented us with the tale of the Kinderhook blob, which was spotted frequently for a period of time and even terrorized the campground. The cryptid was white and was simply a blob that could float high up in the tree line. The bodies of water in this state house many aquatic beasts such as Kipsy from the Hudson River, Old Greenie from Cayuga Lake, and a giant salamander from Onondaga Lake. The most fascinating story emerged from Seneca Lake, where a steamboat captain with many passengers on board all saw what was described as an ancient Cladestes. The creature actually tried to attack the craft, but when they collided, the impact broke the beast's back. Or so they thought. Although to its credit, it hit the steamer hard enough to knock all the passengers off of their feet. The crew tied the creature to the boat, intent on bringing it to shore, but the rope snapped and it vanished under the surface. Later, reports would emerge of other people seeing the creature again, so apparently its back wasn't broken. Following this, we took a trip to the state of Virginia on August 3rd. Virginia was our first state outside of New Jersey that really didn't have a lot of cryptids to talk about. There were sightings of a large two-tailed beaver around the Yorktown refinery. The sightings of devil monkeys was a new addition to our list. Yes, we had rebobs from California, but this version didn't fly and boiled down to an extremely intelligent and aggressive pack of monkeys. Along with these cryptids, there are reports of thunderbird, werewolf, and dogman sightings as well. A viewer named Will Wagonspack left a comment saying that in McGovney County, there are reports of a winged dogman making its home in the mountains. Sadly, I was unable to find more information about this. I suppose if we have a winged Bigfoot a la Bat Squatch, why not a winged Dogman? As mentioned, while the encounter stories are interesting, there is a distinct lack of numbers when it comes to cryptids in this state. A viewer named I Am Whosoever wrote that the state has a lot of cryptids, but they are seen so often that they are just accepted as existing and aren't really considered worthy of talking about. With our Louisiana video, I think this sentiment is quite prevalent there as well. September 7th saw our investigations heading to Alaska. Oddly enough, I still agree with my decision to include a Bigfoot story on the main list. The Port Chatham monster is one of those rare encounters where a Sasquatch actively hunted people and continually terrorized the town until everyone decided to leave or were killed. Alaska has a lot of wolf-like cryptids such as Acklet, which is a mix between a wolf and an orca, the Amarok is a bear-wolf hybrid, and a giant white Wahila makes its return for a second time in this video. While I'm not sure if it is truly a cryptid or not, the state is said to have a giant polar bear species. Iliamna Lake is said to be home to a group of torpedo-shaped animals known as Ili. They are said to be fairly aggressive and will intentionally sink boats and eat any human that falls into the water. Thunderbirds are frequently seen in the state. As such, I forgot to include it in my original video, but longtime viewer named James Kasusnik informed me on something fascinating. The school he went to, East Anchorage, actually utilized the Thunderbird as their mascot, and the building even included a few stained glass windows representing the creature. The Kushtaka is an interesting cryptid known as an Otterman, since it is basically a type of Bigfoot that has an otter-like head and paws. The last cryptid of interest would be the Adlet, which is their version of a Dogman. Missouri is next up, and we last visited it on October 5th. A real oddity in the form of a giant frog-like creature was seen in the Charlton River in La Plata. It was reported by two different people, with one of them being so shaken by his encounter that he refused to give too much information about what had happened. Mud Lake in St. Joseph is said to have a lake serpent that is powerful enough to tear fishing nets apart and has been known to violently ram boats. This state has sightings of the elusive chupacabra, as well as a version of a gargoyle type of being. Hellhounds are quite prominent here, especially in the town of Nixa, but the most popular canine-like being would be known as the booger dog. For all intents and purposes, the story seems to describe a dogman, but due to it changing shape, I still feel that labeling it as skinwalker is probably more accurate. A viewer named Robert Levy left a comment saying that dogman sightings are quite common, and in fact his wife had seen one in the town of Lone Jack. The most popular cryptid here would be the beast known as Momo, which is short for the Missouri monster. By all appearances, it seems to be a shaggy-haired Bigfoot with orange eyes. The sightings are fascinating with this one, since it has very detailed reports and even attacking two women while they were out at a picnic. It would then trap them in their car for a period of time. On November 2nd, we traveled to the state of Maryland to see what cryptids reside there. With this, we found that this area was said to house a vicious battle between two very different types of cryptids. An odd flying bloodthirsty beast with tentacles coming from its mouth known as the Snallygaster, and a specific dogman called the Deweo. Even though the two are enemies and will fight each other, both beings are also known to attack humans as well. In Wacomico County, there is a human-cat hybrid type of creature that is said to roam about at night. This seems to be very similar to the being that we had previously talked about in Texas. Of course, the most famous cryptid in the state would be the Goat Man that is found on Fletcherton Road and Crybaby Bridge. A version of the Jersey Devil was seen near Greensboro, and it even left behind distinct footprints. Or should I say hoof prints. A half-man, half-snake-like being known as Boa Man has a few sightings, but details are rather sparse, other than a single report of an alleged attack on a young girl. In that video, a longtime viewer named Susan B. told me of a sighting where she thought she may have encountered this creature. Of course, there are Bigfoot sightings, but I'm sure you probably figured this by now. A fascinating cryptid sighting was that of a giant 4.5 foot tall chicken that was seen by a group of people. Moving through our list, we go to Colorado, in which we visited it on December 7th. This state had some really strange creatures to discover. At the top of this list probably would be the beings similar to graboids from the movie Tremors, and they are known as augurinos. Yes, a large worm that caused a lot of problems for the state. Then there was a devil cat known as a glaucus, which resembled a mountain lion, but was capable of paralyzing its prey just by looking at it. Twin Lake Reservoir in Lake County is said to have a lake serpent, and Lake Dillon Reservoir also has a type of water creature as well. This shouldn't come as a shock, but thunderbirds are frequently seen flying in the sky. This state has one of my favorite types of cryptids, and that would be ones of the dinosaur variety. A 3.5 foot tall creature, simply known as a river dinosaur, was said to resemble a raptor from Jurassic Park, has been seen in many locations around the area. In the mountains, 2 creatures are said to reside there. The first one is an odd being known as Tommyknockers. I actually made a video dedicated to them a while ago. The other beast is really something you rarely hear about stateside, at least, and that would be a Yeti. For posterity, I wanted to mention that a viewer named Bladnaki wrote a comment saying that there were goat people in this state. I looked into this and I couldn't find anything, but I don't doubt it. Oklahoma was the next state that we investigated on January 4th of 2021. This location had some real unique beings, such as the elusive deer people. While you may think that the name doesn't sound threatening, apparently they have a few forms. One being a human-deer hybrid, or they can take on a spirit form. Both versions are very dangerous, and they have even been nicknamed the Siren of the Forest. If you recall the lore of how deadly sirens were, then I think it will give you a good idea about how dangerous these beings are. In Calumet there are sightings of a wolf-deer creature, and in Tahlequah we see more sightings of an alligator man. Although this version has sometimes been called a lizard man, and it hangs around Stillwater Cemetery. Another version of this is known as the Frederick Lake Monster. Yes, this state has Thunderbird sightings, but there is another version that terrorized the town of Clarita, and it was viewed as an actual dragon. We don't find too many stories about that type of cryptid. Oklahoma does have a velociraptor type of sighting, but the real oddity is how many hybrids this state has. Not only is there a dog man, but there is an armadillo man, a cat man, a coyote man, a goat man, and even a cow woman. Of course, there are many Bigfoot sightings, with one in El Reno being thoroughly investigated. I think my favorite cryptid from this location would be the orcs that are said to reside in the Chelsea Cemetery in Rogers County. Interestingly, many people in the comment section told me about their sightings of these orcs. On February 1st, we took our road trip to Tennessee. Starting off, this state has a fantastic creature known as a phantom kangaroo. Even though normal kangaroos can be dangerous, apparently this one was actually carnivorous and left a lot of bodies in its wake, including a German Shepherd police dog. There is said to be a red maned cheetah and a 6-legged wampus cat roaming about the land. Bigfoot sightings are plentiful, such as the Flintville Monster, the albino white screamer, and the wild man. All these versions are very aggressive and have been known to cause death. Although, the white screamer has also been described as appearing to be what is known as a crawler, which is similar to the fictitious rake. Along with this is many reports of skinwalkers in the area. There is a giant 25-foot long snake-like creature in the Tennessee River, known simply as the Tennessee Terror. This creature has scared many people of the water, and it is known to ram boats. In Cove Creek, there were reports of a 4-foot-tall bird encountered by soldiers during the American Revolutionary War. Portions of the description sound like a cockatrice, but when struck, it shot red liquid out of its mouth, almost in self-defense. The biggest oddity was a 3-clawed creature found in the cave of Hamblin County. It was said to be covered in fur but had a human face. The woman who originally saw the creature found an ancient paper written in German that included a picture, and she says it shows exactly what she saw. Many are under the impression that the creature was actually a cave sloth. A viewer named Patricia left me a comment stating that from what she was able to decipher, the text was actually talking about an African lion. I find this interesting, and it especially reinforces why I love my community. Leave it to you to be able to decode the mystery behind this odd paper. Maine was up next on our itinerary on March 1st. So far we have seen some real strange cryptids in our recap, such as giant chickens, a green squirrel, and a phantom kangaroo, but this state has a spectral moose. It is unclear if it is simply a cryptid, a spirit, or a mix of the two. Apparently many people have encountered this creature and even shot at it. Each time it will either vanish from sight, or in the worst case scenario, attack a person. The creature known as the Kawakwa was one that I originally tied to a Sasquatch type, but I am thinking it is more similar to a Wendigo. It is cannibalistic, has a heart made of ice, and started its life as a human being. This state has sightings of goatmen, black panthers, pterosaurs, and of course Sasquatch. This was the location where we learned about a particularly scary encounter a family had with a pack of dogmen. Near Palmyra, the creatures surrounded their home and kept them trapped inside until sunrise. A viewer named Laura Tukey left me a comment stating that she saw a thunderbird while driving between Westbrook and Auburn. Wisconsin would be next on April 5th. The most famous cryptid would be one that I made a video about a while ago, which is the Beast of Bray Road. This state has a lot of water cryptids such as the one found in Devil's Lake, Rock Lake, Red Cedar Lake, and many others. They all vary in description from looking like a serpent to a hairy cow to simply a Nessie. I mentioned in that video that just about every body of water has some type of a mysterious creature swimming under the surface. Oh, here we go again with spectral animals, and this time we have spectral chickens. Although they aren't giant, spew strange liquid, or even an odd color. Rather, they are simply normal chickens that appear on the road known as Chicken Alley, but they are said to actually be spirits. You all know my rule about ghosts and cryptid videos, but how could I not include ghost chickens? There are reports of a reptile man that can fly near the town of La Crosse. This being was actually seen by a lot of people, including DCNR rangers. Of course, there are many sightings of Bigfoot, and with a lot of encounters describing them as aggressive. There are also dogman sightings outside of Bray Road as well. Thunderbirds are frequently seen flying about. This state's most famous and dare I say controversial cryptid would be the oddity known as the hodag. This isn't cryptid related, but after making the video, the artist behind this photo reached out to me. So as always, I wanted to shout him out. His name is Rod Umlauf from Umlauf Art Studios, and he has made quite a few fantastic paintings of this elusive hodag. Thank you for your work. On May 3rd, we finally ventured to one of the biggest, if not the biggest cryptid state there is, West Virginia. It should go without saying that this is home to the Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, and the Grafton Monster. An equally popular cryptid would be the white-colored dog-like being known as white things, or devil dogs. These red-eyed beings normally kill their prey by ripping out its throat or draining its blood chupacabra style. They are very vicious and normally walk around on all fours, but have been seen running on their back legs as well. They will attack humans, but for some reason they can't physically harm them. People report feeling their flesh being torn by the beast's fangs, but once rescued, no injuries can be found. There are reports of another large dog breed known as the Blue Devil. It was the size of a small horse and terrorized many farms. Thunderbirds are frequently seen, but more terrifying is a creature known as the Snaggletooth Rock. This massive bird is known to fly away with deer in its talon and will attack humans who dare to get too close to its territory. With all the odd cryptids in this state, it goes a step farther with the one known as the Beast of Beckley. This was a massive shadow beast that was said to have yellow eyes, a mouth filled with pointy teeth, but the rest of its form was cloaked in darkness. This state has many versions of Bigfoot. It has a giant beaver, and a man-eating naked bear known as Nya-Guahe. West Virginia is said to be home to the giant turtle we talked about in PA, known as Agua, and there are sightings of a giant horned snake named Uktana. One of our last 3 states was Louisiana, which we visited on June 7th. Anyone who is interested in cryptids knows that the infamous loup-garou is said to make its home here. Not to mention that along with other Bigfoot sightings, the most famous is the Honey Island Swamp Monster. However, a lesser-known one would be the version of the Gator Man known as Parlangua. Keeping with that theme, there is said to be a giant gator in the swamp simply known as Dino Gator. An interesting cryptid is known as the Grunch, and while it has many descriptions from being bloodthirsty little people to a monkey, the most fascinating account is it looks like the true reptilian form of a chupacabra. It is even said to drain blood from its victims in the same fashion. As usual, there are many thunderbird and even pterosaur-type beings seen all over the state. Along with this list are hellhound sightings, plesiosaur lake monster sightings, and even a fairy-type being known as a lutin. A viewer named Sean Oliver mentioned that there are stories about a fluker lizard man and a giant spider reported near Leesville in the 1970s. I couldn't find much on this, but I do appreciate the information. On July 12th, we started rounding out our cryptid family road trip of visiting North Carolina. With this state, there have been multiple sightings of mermaids and sirens for years. A viewer named James Kasusnik then shared a story about a similar creature that the woman in the story claimed was a fairy, but by all accounts, it seemed to be a merman. There are a few typical sea creature sightings, such as Normie from Lake Norman, or the one hit by the steamer off of Cape Lookout. A real oddity was the beast of Bladdenborough, which was said to appear to be a mix of a dog and a bear. During its reign of terror, it decapitated many farm animals. As usual, we have reports of thunderbirds, pterosaurs, black panthers, hellhounds, and you guessed it, Bigfoot. Oddly enough, I thought that this was the first state I encountered that didn't have some type of dogman sighting, although a viewer named Stormy Williams mentioned that there were reports of one such creature being seen on Roanoke Island. Finally, we ended our journey to the halfway mark with Georgia on August 2nd. There are reports of a Mothman or gargoyle-like being attacking a family in a home in East Georgia. This creature tried to enter the house through the roof and walls, all the while the family hid in the bathroom. It stayed on the property until the morning light hit. We then learned about a creature similar to the raptors in Jurassic Park, known simply as the Georgia Raptor. These types of beings are almost becoming as common as Bigfoot, Dogman, and Thunderbirds. Speaking of which, this state has sightings of those three as well. Did you like that smooth transition? Georgia doesn't have a lot of water cryptids, but there are reports of mermaids and the ever-famous version of Nessie known as the Altamaha. The serpent-tongued bear-wolf hybrid known as a wog is said to make its home in the Winder area. A real fascinating creature known as Old Green Eyes has been seen around the Snodgrass Hill. While you may assume it would look like a Bigfoot, apparently it more resembles a ghoul. An avid viewer named Isabet left a comment stating that a friend of hers and his wife were staying in the park where this being has been reported to dwell. It was dark when they reached their car, and as they neared they saw a black-colored creature kneeling down, which they assumed was simply a bear. They shined a flashlight on it and it stood up on its hind legs. It was then that they realized how tall it was. Its fur was a pale color, and its green eyes were placed in its skull like a human being. They quickly realized this wasn't a bear, and they scrambled to get to their car. Another viewer named Kara Steele stated that while on a date, she stopped at Wilder Tower, another known haunt for this being, and suddenly a fog rolled in from out of nowhere, and they noticed something in the tower looking at them. They also decided to leave the area quickly. Of course, the most terrifying cryptid on this entire recap has to be the one found in this state, and that would be the beaver shark. So in ending this, I have to say that it was quite an undertaking. Being this took me 2 weeks to put together, I now know I need to start on the last half a lot sooner than I did for this part. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I finally gave you a video that many of you have been asking for. A long one. Honestly, I have no idea how long this video will turn out to be, but by looking at the number of pages on my script, I will say it will probably be about double the normal time. I sincerely thank all of you for making this series as enjoyable and popular as you have. All of your comments and stories are fantastic, and I couldn't be more grateful. So true to form, please continue voting for which state you would like to see next. As promised, I should be showing you the map showing all the states that are left. As a bonus, I am also including my tally sheet, indicating which states have what number of votes already. I debated showing this information off, but eventually decided that you probably would appreciate it. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.